Kesha Williams pushed her cleaning cart through the curved hallway of Kepler Station's most expensive section. The artificial gravity here worked perfectly, unlike the cheaper levels where she lived. Her work uniform felt tight after another long shift, but the pay from cleaning these luxury suites helped support her family back on Earth Colony 7. The door to Penthouse 12 slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the view of 3 different star systems painted the walls with colored light. This was where Thexan Moore lived, the richest alien she'd ever met. The Vrelian had 4 arms and skin that changed color when he got excited or angry. Kesha had been cleaning his place for 6 months now. He barely noticed her, which was fine. Most aliens saw human workers as invisible anyway. She preferred it that way. The penthouse looked like a museum. Strange artifacts from dozens of worlds filled glass cases and floating display platforms. Golden statues, crystal formations that hummed with energy, weapons that looked more like art than tools. Thexan collected these things like some people collected stamps. She started dusting the main display case near the enormous window. Each item probably cost more than her family made in 10 years. A silver chalice from some dead civilization. A glowing orb that pulsed like a heartbeat. A set of ceremonial knives with handles carved from what looked like bone. Then she saw it. Tucked between a golden crown and a set of prayer beads sat a simple silver ring. No fancy gems or exotic metals. Just plain silver with a pattern carved around the band. Tiny spirals that seemed to flow into each other, creating shapes that almost looked like they were moving. Kesha's cleaning cloth fell from her hand. The ring was exactly like the one her grandmother wore. Not similar. Not close. Exactly the same down to the smallest detail. Her grandmother had shown it to her countless times, told her the story of how it came to their family. 5 generations of women had worn that ring. Her great-great-grandmother received it from a mysterious visitor who came from the stars, back when humans were just learning to leave Earth. The visitor had stayed only one night, left the ring as payment for food and shelter, then disappeared forever. The family had treasured it ever since. But how could there be 2 identical rings? The one her grandmother wore never left Earth Colony 7. It sat in a safety box in her small apartment, too precious to wear every day now that she was getting older. This can't be real, she whispered to herself. Her hands shook as she pulled out her personal communication device. She had to take a picture, had to show her family. But before she could activate the camera function, a voice behind her made her jump. Is something wrong, human? Thexan had entered the room without making a sound. His 4 arms were folded behind his back, and his large eyes studied her with curiosity. The translation device on his chest turned his clicking language into perfect English. Kesha quickly put away her communication device. She wasn't supposed to use personal electronics while working. Sorry, sir. I was just admiring your collection. That piece. Thexan moved closer, his claws clicking softly on the metal floor. It's not particularly valuable. Simple craftsmanship. But it has an interesting history. He opened the display case and carefully lifted the ring. In the light from the stars outside, the spiral pattern seemed to glow faintly. I acquired this from a dealer who specializes in artifacts from extinct worlds. It belonged to the last survivor of a primitive planet that was cleared during our expansion operations 200 years ago. Kesha felt her heart start beating faster. Cleared? Yes. My people found a world with valuable resources but no intelligent life. During the extraction process they discovered one native still alive. Barely civilized, according to the reports. The creature died shortly after capture, but not before our scientists could study its possessions. He held up the ring. This was the only item of any interest. The room started spinning around Kesha. She gripped the edge of the display case to keep from falling. What were the coordinates of this world? Thexan's skin changed from its normal blue-gray to a darker shade. His species did that when confused or concerned. Why would a human care about such details? Please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to know. He moved to a wall panel and touched it with one of his 4 hands. Numbers and star charts appeared in the air between them. Sector 7G. Grid reference 847 to 223. Nothing there now but mining equipment and storage facilities. Kesha's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor, staring up at him with wide eyes. Sir, she said, her voice shaking, that ring you're holding? My mother has one just like that. The silver ring slipped from Thexan's grasp and clattered onto the floor. All 4 of his hands were trembling now. Thexan stared at the human woman sitting on his floor. His 3 hearts were beating so fast he could hear them in his ears. The silver ring lay between them, looking innocent and harmless, but somehow it had just turned his entire world upside down. "Your mother has a ring like this?" he asked, his voice coming out as barely a whisper through the translator. Kesha nodded, still shaking. She pulled herself up to sit properly, her brown eyes never leaving his face. "Not like this one, sir. The exact same ring. Same silver, same spiral pattern, same size. Everything." "That's impossible." Thexan picked up the ring with trembling claws. "This artifact is unique. It came from a dead world. There were no survivors." "What if you're wrong?" Kesha's voice was getting stronger, but he could see fear in her eyes. "What if there were survivors and you just didn't know about them?" Thexan felt his skin shifting colors rapidly, something that happened when his emotions were out of control. Blue to gray to dark purple and back again. His people called it the truth reaction. It happened when reality didn't match what you believed. "Show me," he said suddenly. "Show me this ring your mother has." Kesha pulled out her communication device again, this time not bothering to hide it. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, calling up old photos from her family archives. When she found what she was looking for, she held it out to him. The image showed an elderly human woman with gray hair and kind eyes. On her finger was a silver ring identical to the one Thexan held. "This is my grandmother, Rosie Williams. She's 91 years old. That ring has been in our family for over 200 years. Thexan's 4 hands couldn't stay still. He kept shifting the ring from one hand to another while staring at the photo. 200 years. That matches the timeline of our expansion into Sector 7G. My grandmother always told us stories about how we got the ring. Her great-grandmother lived on a farming world back then. Simple people just trying to make a living growing food and raising animals. One night, a stranger came to their door. Thexan sat down heavily in his favorite chair, all 4 arms resting on the armrests. What kind of stranger? Someone who fell from the sky in a burning ship. My ancestor found him hurt and dying. She took care of him for 3 days, gave him food and water, tried to heal his wounds. But he was too badly injured. The Vrelian's skin was now a pale gray color, almost white. And the ring? Before he died, the stranger gave it to her as payment for her kindness. He said it would help her remember that not all visitors from space were enemies. Kesha's voice cracked. He said others would come and some would be dangerous, but she should never forget that some still had good hearts. Thexan stood up so quickly that his chair spun backward. He walked to his wall panel and began pulling up old military records with shaking hands. Data streams filled the air around them, showing maps, coordinates, and operational reports from 2 centuries ago. "Operation Clear Sky," he read aloud. "Sector 7G resource extraction. Primary objective: harvest rare minerals from uninhabited world. Status: complete success, no native resistance encountered." But as he dug deeper into the files, details that didn't make sense began to appear. Reports of structures consistent with primitive agriculture. Notes about unusual tool marks suggesting recent habitation. Comments about traces of organized settlement patterns. "They knew," Kesha said softly, reading over his shoulder. "Your people knew there were people living there. But the final report says no intelligent life was found." Thexan's voice was getting higher, more distressed. "No survivors, no witnesses, no complications." More files appeared. Medical reports about 1 native specimen recovered during final sweep operations. Scientific analysis of primitive artifacts including metal jewelry and simple tools. A notation that the specimen expired after 72 hours in custody. Kesha covered her mouth with her hand. "The stranger who gave my ancestor the ring. He wasn't a visitor who crashed. He was someone your people captured. But how did he escape? How did he get to your ancestor's farm? Maybe he didn't escape. Maybe your people thought he was dead and dumped his body somewhere. Maybe he crawled for miles before my great-great-grandmother found him." Thexan pulled up a geographic analysis of the area where Kesha's family had lived. It was only 50 kilometers from the main Vrelian extraction site. "Dear gods," he whispered. "What have we done?" "You didn't know," Kesha said, but her voice was cold now. "Your people classified it as an uninhabited world, but people lived there. People who had families and farms and hopes for the future. If this is true, then humans aren't newcomers to space. You're refugees. Survivors of worlds my people destroyed." The weight of the revelation hit both of them at the same time. Every human Thexan had ever seen working in the station's restaurants, cleaning the corridors, fixing the machinery, they weren't immigrants seeking better opportunities. They were descendants of people whose worlds had been taken from them. "How many?" he asked quietly. How many human families have artifacts like this? I don't know, Kesha replied. But I'm going to find out. Kesha couldn't sleep that night. She sat in her small workers' quarters, staring at her communication device. The conversation with Thexan kept replaying in her mind. She had to know the truth, but where would she even start? She decided to call her grandmother first. Rosie Williams lived in a retirement community on Earth Colony 7, thousands of light years away. The quantum communication system was expensive, but this was important enough to spend her savings on. The holographic image of her grandmother appeared above the device. Even at 91, Rosie's eyes were sharp and alert. Kesha, honey, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Grandma, I need to ask you about the ring. The one that's been in our family forever. Rosie's expression grew serious. What about it? Do you know other families who have similar things? Old artifacts that came from strangers who fell from the sky. Her grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. The Johnson family down the street has a pendant with the same kind of markings. The Browns have a small knife that their great-grandfather said came from a dying skyman. The Washington family keeps a metal disc that's covered in those same spiral patterns. Kesha's heart started racing. How many families, Grandma? In our settlement alone? Maybe a dozen. But I've heard stories from other colonies too. Lot of old families got treasures they can't explain, all from around the same time period. Can you contact them? Can you ask them to send pictures of their artifacts? I suppose I could. But Kesha, why is this so important all of a sudden? Kesha explained what had happened with Thexan, how he had a ring identical to theirs, how it supposedly came from the last survivor of a destroyed world. Her grandmother's face grew pale as she listened. Lord help us, Rosie whispered when Kesha finished. I always wondered why the stranger seemed so desperate, so scared. Like he was running from something terrible. Over the next few days, messages began pouring in from Earth Colony 7. Picture after picture of artifacts that all shared the same characteristics. The spiral patterns, the simple but elegant designs, the silver metal that never tarnished. Kesha counted 23 families in her grandmother's settlement alone who possessed similar items. Meanwhile, Thexan was conducting his own investigation. He used his wealth and connections to access deeper levels of the Vrelian military archives, files that required special permission to view. What he found made him sick to his stomach. Operation Clear Sky wasn't just about one world. It was part of a much larger campaign called Expansion Protocol 7. Over a period of 50 years, Vrelian forces had cleared hundreds of worlds for resource extraction. The official records all showed the same thing. Uninhabited planets with valuable resources, quick and efficient extraction, no complications. But when Thexan looked at the detailed survey reports, a different picture emerged. References to primitive structures appeared in dozens of files. Tool marks suggesting recent habitation showed up again and again. Organic waste patterns consistent with agriculture was mentioned in over half the reports. The Vrelians had known. They had known there were people living on these worlds and they had taken them anyway. Devin Harris, Kesha's cousin who worked as a maintenance engineer on the station, became their unofficial researcher among the human population. He started asking careful questions, reaching out to human workers across the facility. You'd be surprised how many of us have old family treasures we can't explain, he told Kesha during one of their secret meetings in a maintenance tunnel. Tommy in the kitchen has a bracelet his grandfather said came from a star brother who died saving his village. Riley from the docking bay has a necklace that's been in her family for 6 generations. What about their stories? Are they similar to ours? Very similar. Strangers who fell from the sky, usually badly injured. They stayed just long enough to recover a little, then gave the family something precious before disappearing. Some died before they could leave. Thexan joined their meetings after Devin convinced Kesha he could be trusted. The Vrelian brought more evidence each time and none of it was good news. I've identified 47 worlds that match the pattern, he said during one gathering. All officially listed as uninhabited, all stripped of resources during the expansion period. But the survey data suggests there were native populations on every single one. 47 worlds, Kesha repeated, trying to process the number. How many people lived on those worlds? Based on the agricultural patterns and settlement sizes mentioned in the surveys? Conservative estimate would be several million per world. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of genocide on an unimaginable scale. So humans didn't just appear in space 50 years ago, Devin said quietly. We've been here all along. We're the survivors. But how did so many escape? The records show complete resource extraction on all these worlds. Thexan had been wondering about that too. I think I found the answer. Look at this. He showed them a personnel file for Commander Keltar Voss, a Vrelian military officer who had served during the expansion period. His record showed exemplary service until suddenly being transferred to a remote outpost and eventually discharged for insubordination. What if some of your military people helped? Kesha suggested. What if they couldn't stomach what was happening and secretly evacuated some of the people before the planets were destroyed? That would explain how human families ended up scattered across so many different systems, Devon added. And why the artifacts are always described as coming from people who were running or hiding. Thexan's skin shifted to deep purple, a color that meant profound sadness in his species. My people didn't just steal your worlds. We erased your entire history and convinced the galaxy you were newcomers. The question now, Kesha said, is what we do with this information. The truth was eating Thexan alive from the inside. For 3 weeks he barely slept. His luxury penthouse felt like a prison filled with stolen artifacts. Every piece in his collection now seemed to whisper accusations at him. How many of these treasures came from worlds his people had destroyed? How many families had been murdered for these pretty trinkets? He knew he had to take the evidence to the Vrelian High Council, but the thought terrified him. These weren't just any government officials. They were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, rulers of an empire that spanned thousands of star systems. Kesha tried to convince him to wait to gather more proof first. But Thexan couldn't live with the knowledge any longer. Every time he saw a human worker in the station corridors, he wondered which destroyed world their ancestors had called home. The High Council met in a massive space station orbiting the Vrelian homeworld. Thexan had only been there twice before, both times for major business deals. The station was bigger than most cities, a floating palace that demonstrated Vrelian power to anyone who visited. Council Prime Hext Al received him in a chamber carved from a single piece of black crystal. The leader of the Vrelian Empire was ancient even by their standards, over 400 years old. His 4 arms moved with deliberate slowness, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Thexan Moore, the Council Prime said without looking up from the data tablets he was reading. Successful merchant, collector of rare artifacts. What brings you before the High Council? I've discovered something terrible, Your Excellency. Something that could change how the galaxy sees our people. Now Hextall looked at him directly. The old Vrelian's eyes were pale yellow, like dying stars. Explain. Thexan activated a holographic display and showed everything he had found. The matching artifacts, the survey reports, the evidence that humans weren't newcomers to space but survivors of Vrelian genocide. As the evidence mounted, other council members began to gather around the display. Their skin colors shifted through various shades of concern, anger, and calculation. When Thexan finished his presentation, the chamber fell silent for several long minutes. This information, Council Prime Hextall said finally, is extremely dangerous. Yes, Your Excellency. That's why I brought it to you immediately. The galaxy needs to know what really happened. We need to make amends to the human survivors. The Council Prime's 4 hands folded together in front of him. You misunderstand me, Thexan. This information is dangerous to us, to our empire, to everything we have built. A cold feeling spread through Thexan's chest. What do you mean? The human infestation should have been completely eliminated during our expansion operations. Their survival is a bureaucratic oversight that we cannot afford to publicize. Infestation. Thexan's voice cracked. They're intelligent beings with families and cultures. They're people. They're witnesses, another council member said coldly. Living proof of methods we used during our early expansion. If other species learned that humans survived our cleansing operations, it could destabilize our authority across 12 sectors. Council Prime Hextall stood up, his full height making him tower over Thexan. Our empire maintains peace through strength and the respect that strength commands. If our subject species begin to see us as genocidal monsters rather than benevolent conquerors, rebellions will spread like wildfire. But we are genocidal monsters, Thexan said, his voice barely above a whisper. We destroyed entire civilizations. We brought order to chaos. We united scattered worlds under one government. The cost in primitive lives was regrettable but necessary. The Council Prime's tone never changed, as if he was discussing the weather. What about making things right? What about helping the human survivors? The human situation will be corrected. Quietly. Efficiently. They should never have been allowed to integrate into galactic society. The meaning of those words hit Thexan like a physical blow. You're talking about finishing what you started. You want to kill them all. We prefer the term administrative cleanup. The humans have served useful roles as laborers and service workers, but their continued existence poses a security risk we can no longer ignore. I won't let that happen. Thexan's 4 hands clenched into fists. I'll warn them. I'll tell everyone what you're planning. Council Prime Hextall smiled, an expression that looked disturbing on a Vrelian face. No, you won't. You're going to return to your comfortable life and forget this conversation ever happened. And if I refuse? Then you'll be charged with treason against the Empire. Your assets will be seized, your citizenship revoked, and you'll spend the rest of your very short life in a military prison. The Council Prime leaned forward. Or perhaps you'll simply have a tragic accident. Wealthy merchants face many dangers when they travel between systems. Thexan felt his world crumbling around him. Everything he had believed about his people, about the empire he had served his entire life, was built on lies and murder. You have one day to decide, the Council Prime said. Keep your mouth shut and continue your profitable life, or lose everything in a futile attempt to save beings who were supposed to be extinct 200 years ago. As Thexan left the High Council chamber, he realized he was facing the hardest choice of his life. His comfortable existence as a wealthy collector, or exposing a truth that would cost him everything but might save thousands of innocent lives. The journey back to Kepler Station felt like the longest trip he had ever taken. And waiting for him there was Kesha Williams, who still believed that truth and justice could win against overwhelming power. He had to decide what mattered more: his own safety or the lives of an entire people who had already survived one attempt at genocide. Thexan returned to his penthouse feeling like a dead man walking. The Council's ultimatum echoed in his mind: keep quiet or lose everything. But how could he live with himself knowing what was coming for the humans? He found Kesha waiting for him in his main room, but something was different about her. She wasn't cleaning or organizing his artifacts. Instead, she stood perfectly straight near his communication console, her hands clasped behind her back like a military officer. How did your meeting with the High Council go? She asked. Thexan stared at her. How did you know I went to see them? Because that's exactly what I expected you to do. You're a decent person, Thexan. When decent people discover genocide, they try to report it to the authorities. Her voice was calm, professional. Nothing like the nervous maid he thought he knew. Kesha, you need to run. You need to warn every human you can find. The Council isn't going to make amends for what happened. They're planning to finish what they started 200 years ago. She nodded as if she had expected this news. They want to eliminate all the witnesses. Standard procedure for cover-ups of this size. You don't seem surprised. That's because I'm not. Kesha moved to his holographic display system and began activating controls with practiced efficiency. Computer, authorization Williams 77 Alpha. Display file package Omega. The room filled with data streams, communication networks, and personnel files that Thexan had never seen before. Maps showing human populations across dozens of star systems. Intelligence reports on Vrelian military movements. Detailed analyses of government officials and their weaknesses. What is this? Thexan whispered. This is what humans have really been doing for the past 200 years. Kesha turned to face him, and her entire demeanor had changed. The timid cleaning woman was gone, replaced by someone who radiated quiet authority. My real name is Commander Kesha Williams, 3rd Generation Intelligence Corps. I'm not actually your maid, Thexan. I'm your assigned surveillance officer. His 4 legs nearly gave out from under him. You've been watching me? I've been watching you for 3 years, ever since you bought that ring. We've had agents monitoring everyone who collects artifacts from the destroyed worlds. Most collectors are just wealthy people who like pretty things. But we had to be sure. More holographic displays activated around the room. Thexan saw faces of humans he recognized from around the station. Devin Harris, the maintenance engineer. Tanya Brooks, the supervisor he had spoken with. Dozens of others. Devin isn't just my cousin. He's Lieutenant Devin Harris, communications specialist. Tanya isn't a maintenance supervisor. She's Colonel Tanya Brooks, tactical operations commander. Almost every human you've ever met is part of our network. Network for what? Documentation. Investigation. Preparation. Kesha gestured to the swirling data around them. We've been recording everything, Thexan. Every Vrelian atrocity, every covered-up genocide, every species your people have liberated. And now, thanks to you accessing those classified files, we have proof from your own military archives. Thexan sank into his chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what he was seeing. How long have you known about the destroyed worlds? We've always suspected. The timing was too convenient. Humans suddenly appearing in space just after the Vrelian expansion ended. But suspicion isn't proof. We needed someone with access to the classified records. So you manipulated me. Made me find the evidence myself. We created the opportunity. But you chose to investigate because you have a conscience. That's why we picked you instead of other collectors. Her expression softened slightly. We could have stolen the information and disappeared, but we needed a Vrelian witness. Someone your own people would have to believe. The Council will never believe anything that threatens their power. We're not trying to convince the Council. We're going to tell everyone else. New displays activated, showing communication arrays spanning half the galaxy. News networks, diplomatic channels, trade communications, even entertainment broadcasts. In 37 minutes, this information will be transmitted simultaneously across every communication system in known space. Every species, every government, every independent colony will know what the Vrelian Empire really did during their expansion. They'll kill you for this. They'll kill all of you. They can try. But here's what your people never understood about humans, Thexan. We don't survive by being stronger or smarter than our enemies. We survive by being underestimated. She activated another display showing population data. There are over 50 million humans scattered across the galaxy now. Living on thousands of different worlds, working in critical infrastructure, embedded in every major government and corporation. We're not refugees hiding in corners anymore. We're everywhere. But how did so many survive the original attacks? Some Vrelian military officers couldn't stomach genocide. They secretly evacuated people before the planets were destroyed. Others escaped in stolen ships. A few families were off-world when the attacks happened. Over 2 centuries, those scattered survivors had children and grandchildren. We spread out, kept quiet, and planned for this day. Thexan stared at the evidence of the massive intelligence operation surrounding him. You turned your own extinction into the largest spy network in galactic history. We learned that the best way to fight enemies who see you as insects is to become invisible until you're ready to sting. Kesha smiled for the first time since revealing her true identity. The galaxy is about to learn that humans don't just survive genocide. We remember it. And we document everything. The communication arrays began activating across the displays. In minutes, the truth would spread across thousands of worlds. What happens now? Thexan asked. Now the galaxy gets to decide what kind of civilizations they want to be part of. And your people get to face the consequences of 2 centuries of lies. As the first transmissions went out, Thexan realized he was witnessing history. Humanity wasn't stepping out of the shadows as victims, but as the species that had turned their greatest tragedy into their ultimate victory.